Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a seriously fascinating set of documents, the March 2026 Development Update, right alongside some major recent infrastructure and master planning reports. Our goal today is pretty ambitious, but super straightforward. We're going to take a macro to micro journey through an economy that's actively trying to pivot from crisis management to long-term growth. We're going to start with the big picture national economic data, zoom all the way down into specific local transit projects, and then pan back out to a multi-decade vision for the future. It's an incredible transformation to watch, so let's dive right in.
Just to give you a quick roadmap for this explainer, we'll be hitting 5 key areas. Number 1, macroeconomic stabilization and risks. Number 2, funding national development projects. 3, reviving Karachi's circular railway. 4, agriculture, governance, and partnerships. And finally, number 5, Godard and the 2050 vision. Keeping this structure in mind is really going to help us see exactly how these seemingly totally separate updates actually connect into one much larger national narrative.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Macroeconomic Stabilization and Risks. So there is a really delicate balancing act going on right now. In the first 8 months of fiscal year 2025 to 2026, the average inflation rate actually eased down to 5.5%, and that's compared to 5.9% during the exact same period last year. This is a massive indicator of stabilization, and it's largely being driven by some very targeted policy and administrative measures. Now, to be totally fair, there was a temporary spike back in February up to 7.0%, but that was driven by specific adjustments in electricity prices, not some kind of systemic demand issue. Overall, the broader trend line here is definitely pointing toward price stabilization.
But this creates a wild economic tug-of-war right now. On the home front, things look surprisingly resilient. Large-scale manufacturing, which actually shrank last year, bounced back with a sustained 4.8% growth. On top of that, worker remittances shot up by 11.3%, injecting $23.2 billion to support the external sector. That's the good news. The bad news? Externally, instability in the Middle East is a massive looming wildcard. Why does that matter to us? Well, about 20% of global oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Petroleum makes up a quarter of Pakistan's imports, and get this, over 85% of that comes directly from the Middle East. Any prolonged disruption there would drastically inflate the import bill and put immense pressure right back on that inflation rate we just celebrated.
Moving right along to Section 2, Funding National Development Projects. Let's shift our scale a bit and look at where the actual capital is being deployed. When we break down the Public Sector Development Program, which has already utilized 361 billion rupees this fiscal year, there's a pretty big surprise. You probably expect infrastructure to absolutely dominate the funding, right? Well, actually, 44% of the utilized funds are flowing straight into social sectors, things like health, education, and the SDGs Achievement Program. Infrastructure, which covers all the transport and energy projects, accounts for 35%. This is super interesting because it highlights a major strategic focus on human capital, prioritizing people just as much as physical concrete and steel.
But hey, it's not just about spending money. It's about optimizing the ledger through some really rigorous project examinations to make sure resources actually align with national priorities. The government managed to pull off cost rationalization savings of 9.9 billion rupees between July and January. That is a huge number. And it's significant because it shows a real commitment to fiscal discipline. They are actively trimming the fat to ensure limited national resources are being utilized as efficiently as possible.
And we definitely need to ground this development spending in human terms. The big takeaway here is that these projects aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they are actual livelihoods. Just looking at the PCI documents reviewed in February 2026 alone, the approved and recommended public investment projects are projected to generate 18,336 direct jobs. Plus, they'll create another 7,320 indirect jobs over the next 3 to 5 years. This is what you call the employment multiplier effect in full swing.
Up next is Section 3, Reviving Karachi's Circular Railway.
The Karachi Circular Railway, or KCR, has literally been dormant for decades. For the longest time, the master plan was to fund its big revival through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, but it just never managed to secure priority status there. So, facing a total dead end, local authorities made a massive strategic shift. In April 2026, the Sindh-Federal governments agreed on a much broader rail restoration plan. And then boom, by May 2026, they secured a massive $1 billion support commitment from the Asian Development Bank. Essentially, they pivoted their funding pursuit from Beijing all the way over to Manila, and it breathed entirely new life into the project. But we got to address the elephant in the room here. If you're someone sitting in Karachi's infamous traffic right now, staring at the bumper in front of you and contemplating your life choices, you really only want to know one thing. When will commuters actually get to ride the KCR? Well, the honest truth from the source material is not yet. Even with all the flashy headlines and massive funding commitments, there is still absolutely no confirmed date for when full passenger operations will actually resume.
Here's why. That initial ADB funding that got released, it's $10 million, and it is strictly for a preparatory phase. Over the next 1 to 2 years, this money is going to fund engineering design reviews, figure out the actual operational planning, set up the institutional arrangements to decide who exactly runs the trains, and finalize the broader financing models. So we are very much in the heavy planning stage right now, not the track-laying stage. Don't get me wrong, it's a massive step forward, but physical changes to your daily commute are definitely still years away.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Agriculture, Governance, and Partnerships.
When we look at the critical pillars of national development, there is a razor-sharp focus right now on food security and self-reliance. And the results coming out of the National Oilseeds Enhancement Program are frankly staggering. This federal initiative to boost domestic edible oil production has pushed canola yields up 328%, and sesame is up an unbelievable 482%. They've done this by promoting these crops across diverse zones like Balochistan and Punjab, and by directly supporting over 300,000 farmers with subsidies for high-quality seeds and machinery. The result? This single program has contributed to an estimated $1.11 billion in import substitution. It is just a textbook example of how you can shift away from relying on imports while simultaneously supercharging local rural livelihoods.
Over on the governance side, accountability is getting baked right into the system. Back in February 2026, technical meetings with the IMF mission focused heavily on refining what they call a project selection scorecard. And what's really noteworthy here is that they specifically included negative marking provisions. The goal is crystal clear. They want to align public investment with program commitments to enforce transparency, smart prioritization, and sheer discipline when deciding which national projects actually get funded and which ones get shelved.
We're also seeing a huge push to strengthen international partnerships. Following some recent bilateral engagements, there's a really fascinating proposal on the table right now, the Pakistan-Bangladesh Knowledge Corridor. This isn't just your standard traditional diplomacy. The focus here is heavily leaning into the future, expanding academic and youth exchanges and promoting deep institutional collaboration in areas like data systems and digital governance. It's all about advancing regional connectivity for the modern age.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Gwadar and the 2050 Vision.
Let's zoom all the way out from this year's budget sheets, because when you look at the master plans, you really see the ultimate scale of the country's ambitions. The Gwadar 2050 Master Plan outlines this staggering socioeconomic transformation for the next 25 years. We are talking about a projected population boom to 2 million people, supporting a $30 billion economy. They're aiming for a per capita GDP of $15,000, which would absolutely dwarf the current national average, all while generating 1.2 million jobs. And perhaps most uniquely, the plan envisions Gwadar as a completely tax and weapon-free zone designed to guarantee a highly secure, incredibly business-friendly environment.
Which brings us to the big picture. We've gone through the data together, inflation is moderating, targeted mega projects are securing serious new funding, and agricultural imports are being successfully substituted. The nation is operating under this long-term vision, Uran Pakistan, which aims to completely transform the country into a $1 trillion economy by 2035. But, as we discussed, the external risks, from geopolitical tensions to massive global energy disruptions, are severe and totally unpredictable. So I'm going to leave you with this question to ponder. With intense global volatility right on the horizon, are the stabilization measures we analyzed today strong enough to actually build the Uran Pakistan of tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the data.